The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. Hope it's a little warmer where you are than here in Indianapolis. I want to thank you for joining us for our Judging for National History Day in Indiana webinar. My name is Bethany Rockovec, and I am the coordinator for Learning and National History Day in Indiana, or NHDI, at the Indiana Historical Society. National History Day is an international learning program where students can choose a history topic of interest to them, research it, and then develop projects on their topic. Students can then go on to contests, which is where you lovely folks come in. This evening, we're going to be talking all about the judging process and what that is like. But before we begin, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, so you are welcome to review it at any point after today. You will actually be getting an email with the recording information, a couple of handouts, and then this PowerPoint as well sometime tomorrow morning. It takes just a minute for this long of a webinar to process fully. I do also want to say that you are more than welcome to ask questions at any point throughout this webinar. In the bottom right-hand corner of your GoToWebinar screen, you'll see a question box. Please feel free to put in any questions you have in there. I will pause several times throughout this webinar to answer questions, and I will either type the answer in directly if it's more an individual question, or if it's one that everyone can benefit from. We'll chat about it a little bit. So please feel free to type them in at any point. I will also stay on the line at the end of the webinar for quite a while, just in case there are any more questions, and you can always email me at any point. So, with all of that being said, I want to thank you for your help in judging for National History Day in Indiana. Your role in this process is significant, not just to the program, but also to all of the students' success throughout the state. We have a lot of information to cover tonight, and I want to give you just a little bit of an overview of what this webinar contains. We're going to go over some general logistics about the contests, discuss the annual theme, then we're going to look at each of the 5 project types. And then I'm going to give you some information on how to evaluate projects. And then finally, we're going to do a little bit of reviewing the expectations of you as a judge. So with that being said, do we have any initial questions before we dive in? All right then, let's get started, shall we? NHDI contests are divided up in a few different ways. Students compete in divisions based on their grade level. Youth or elementary is for grades 4 through 5, junior division is for grades 6 through 8, and senior division is for grades 9 through 12. From there, we divide further down into categories. Students can choose one of 5 types of projects to create, including papers, websites, performances, documentaries, and exhibits. Students can work in groups of up to 5 students for all projects, except for paper. Paper is the only individual-only category. Students will only compete against students in the same division and category as themselves. For example, a junior individual website will not be going up against a senior individual website. A senior group documentary will not compete against a senior individual documentary. Everything stays in its own division and category as far as the rankings are concerned. Now, as you signed up to judge, you were able to select what your preference is for not only project type, but for age that you would like to speak with. I do my very best to match your preferences with what you will actually be judging, but I do want to say that I cannot guarantee it. For some contests, for example, we just don't have an age group that you will be able to judge. For example, not all of the areas of the state have a youth division to judge, so I can't match you with what doesn't exist. We just closed our registration for the South Bend region, and we have 2 senior students for the entire region. The rest is all that junior division. So again, I will try to pair you with your preferences, but I can't pair you with what doesn't exist. but if it is possible, you will get your preference. All of our students begin by creating projects in their classroom or in their home. Some schools will have showcases or competitions, but some don't. We have around 5,000 to 6,000 students who complete projects all around the state. Students then move on to regional contests if they choose to, which is where you guys come into play. Through 7 regions, we have about 1,800 to 2,000 students who participate in those contests. At each regional contest, we take roughly the top third of students onto the state contest. We have around 550 students who then compete at the state contest. From there, it gets even more cutthroat. We take the top 2 projects in each division and category onto the national contest, which works out to around 65 students. The only division that does not go onto the national contest is the youth division. The feedback that you provide students throughout this process is vital, as it tells them how to improve for each next level of competition. Students can edit their project after each contest, and they will use the feedback that you give them to know how to improve and, hopefully, advance to the national contest in Washington, D.C. in the summer. That being said, even the students that don't move on will use your feedback as a learning experience to learn how to better develop their research and project creation skills. No matter which contest you are at, the rough schedule remains pretty much the same. Before the contest, we will ask that you read through the papers and websites that you receive if you are sent them. If you are sent a documentary, I do ask that you try to view it ahead of time. We are testing this out with schools this year to submit documentaries early, so your feedback on how this works is vital as we start to hammer out those kinks and what that process may look like. At the state contest, we will actually be asking our paper and website judges to work together prior to the contest to determine their rankings, particularly to discover which students will move on to the final round. Even though you will be reading some of these materials ahead of time and potentially selecting the top entries before speaking to the students, you should still come on the contest day to talk to the students. The contest is where the students have an opportunity to share their knowledge, even if their project has been seen and scored ahead of time. On the contest day, you will join me for orientation, where we will go over the plan for the day, special notes, we'll confirm judging groups and other things like that, and you'll have an opportunity to eat some breakfast and get some coffee in you during that time. It will begin at 8 a.m. for each contest and last around 45 minutes tops, so that you have time to head out to your specific judging rooms. Then, judging will happen starting at 9 a.m. and last until noon at the latest. From noon onwards, you will have time to write your feedback for the entries you judged. Lunch will be served during that time. In case you haven't noticed a trend, I like to keep you guys very well fed during contests. Your end time for the day is actually going to depend on you and how long it takes you to finish writing your feedback. At the state contest, be aware that there will be a final round of judging taking place starting at around 1:30. So you may have to write quickly to get back out there and judge, but you will know ahead of time if you are a final round judge. Otherwise, I would say most of our judges finish up their feedback by around 1 to 2 at the very latest. Do we have any questions so far before we dive into the judging process? All right, doesn't look like it, so we will move on to the more nitty-gritty side of judging. And we're going to start with the annual theme. Each year, the National Office selects an annual theme to unite all History Day projects. The theme is broad on purpose to encourage students to think outside the box. This year's theme is Triumphant Tragedy. Through their project, students should describe how their topic relates to the theme. They should also draw conclusions about the significance of the topic. In other words, their projects are answering the "so what" and "why is this important" question. Regardless of notoriety or conventional topic selection, each project should demonstrate these two aspects. We will go much further into topic bias in just a little bit, but that is something to keep in mind. All of the projects should explore multiple perspectives. They don't need to incorporate both triumph and tragedy, but I highly encourage the students to see that if they are looking at multiple sides of the story, they will inevitably see both triumph and tragedy come into play. The other thing that's important to note is that all of the projects that you see should be able to stand on their own. If the only way the project makes sense and is clear and gets that point across is because the student or students are there explaining it, then the project shouldn't rank as high. The interviews are important because they give students an opportunity to share their knowledge with others and gain valuable public speaking experience. But the project should stand on its own. And the reason for this is that in the final round of judging, there is no interview portion. If the project only advanced beyond that first round because the students explained it well in the interview, but not on their project, then it won't rank as highly when it comes to the next round. Do we have any questions about the annual theme and that portion? Again, at any point during the webinar, please feel free to pop in with questions, not just when prompted. I'm more than happy to chime in at any point with those. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to the project categories. Now, I will say that there are many, many more rules associated with each of these project types than what I am going to go into today. A lot of those rules are ones that the teachers should be keeping track of and should be aware of. The ones that I'm going to highlight tonight are really the ones that you as judges should be aware of and should be keeping track of. Tomorrow, I will also be sending out the rule book associated with National History Day, so you do have that full booklet for your information in case you would like to look into that deeper. The rules I'm going to highlight are the big ones, and the first one we're going to look at is for performance. Performances are a maximum of 10 minutes long. All of the set pieces should be set up and torn down by the students. Students may dress up, use props and set to convey their topic, or they may not. Regardless of their set, costume, and prop choices, their choices should be appropriate for what they're talking about. If the students are dressed as 1920s flappers and they're discussing a battle during the Civil War, then they may not have thought thoroughly about their choices. And I urge you to feel free to ask them why they made those costuming choices. Some of our students are very creative. I urge you to allow the students to explain their creativity, if it's not apparent to you, in their process paper, which we will get more into, and in their interview. For each judging time for a performance, you will have 20 minutes. Performances are open to the public, so the next project may already be in the room while someone is performing. So after a group has torn down their set and moved out of the way, I urge you to just go ahead and invite the next group up to give you their process paper and annotated bibliography while they set up their project. Any question about performances so far? Looks like we've got one question. Good question. Does the 10 minutes include setup time? It does not. So the way this that'll work is students have 5 minutes to set up. So the moment you call them up and they hand you their materials, that is when their 5 minutes to setup begins. They can take up to that 5 minutes. Most of them take less than that time. So what you'll do, that process is you will call up the next group. You will ask for their process paper and their annotated bibliography. They will give you all of those. You'll invite them to set up their performance, and someone will kind of keep track. One of the judges, you'll be in a team of at least 2 judges. One of you will start the timer, make sure it doesn't go beyond 5 minutes. When they are finished setting up, they will stand there waiting for you to let them know that you are ready for them to begin their performance. You will stop that setup time at that point, reset it. They will say their names and the title of their project. You will start the timer and launch into that 10 minutes. At the end of that 10 minutes, you'll go on ahead and conduct your interview with the students, and they will have an additional 5 minutes max to tear down. I will have stopwatches and timers available, but you are also welcome to use your phone, your watch, whatever you would like, but I will have those materials available for everyone. Does that answer your question, Michael? I want to make sure that I clarified enough for you. Perfect. All right. Anything else for performance? I will say performance is my favorite, and I never get enough kids to do it. All the kids know it too when I go talk to them. They know I'm a sucker for it. All right, we will move on to documentaries. Documentaries are, again, 10 minutes long, just like the performance, and it'll follow that same structure. They will have 5 minutes to set up and 5 minutes to tear down. At each contest location, there is a computer and projector screen provided for the students. So their setup time should be really not longer than plugging in their USB drive or pulling up their documentary on YouTube, something like that. So their setup time shouldn't really take all that long. You will begin that 10-minute timing, and again, I will have stopwatches for everyone. The moment the first sound or visual appears on the screen, after the students say their name and the title of their project. Documentaries are a lot of fun because they can incorporate photos, video, music, students' original script, all into one video, just like what they might see in class. Again, this is something new we're trying out this year, but you may be sent the documentaries ahead of time. It may become standard in the future, which is why we are trying it out now. So if you are sent a documentary ahead of time, I ask that you do try to view it prior to the contest, but I understand that since it is new, that may not be possible. Even if you view it ahead of time, you will still view it on the contest day. But viewing it ahead of time will give you an opportunity to be more familiar with it. All of the documentaries should include credits, just like a regular documentary you may see. These should be a brief list of sources and not the full citation. For example, if they used several photos from the Library of Congress, maybe from different collections and different parts of their archives, in their credits, they would just say Library of Congress. The full citation for all of those images would then be in their annotated bibliography. Documentaries, just like performances, are open to the public. So again, the next student may already be in the room. Just like performance, you'll have 20 minutes to judge. When you are ready for the next entry, you can feel free to call the next group up and begin judging. Any questions about documentaries before we move on? Good question. Are there credits and bibliography in the presentation, so the performances? They will not have credits for their performance, but they do have an annotated bibliography that they will give to you. And so they should still be using sources to build their presentation and build their performance. but they don't have to cite it during their performance. That'll be afterwards in their annotated bibliography. You are also welcome to ask questions of the students about some of the sources that they found. And so if you notice that they have a lot of photos from a Smithsonian Institute, you can ask them if they had any difficulties finding those images, or if they were able to find them fairly easily. You can feel free to ask them about their sources. A large part of this is figuring out their research process and really making sure that they've done their research on their topic. If they have a lot of books that they have written down for their secondary sources, feel free to ask them, how many of these did you read? Did you read all of them cover to cover? Did you just skim them? They should be prepared to answer, no, I just saw the title and thought it was interesting and wrote it down, or no, I looked at these chapters because they pertain to what I was researching. All right, anything else for documentaries? I'll share one nice anecdote for you guys. The two lovely ladies on screen there traveled with me to Washington, D.C. this past June for the national contest. Their documentary was one of 50 selected to be displayed at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So out of 200 documentaries, theirs was one selected. There are 57 affiliates related with National History Day, and only 23 of them were selected to be part of this presentation. So Indiana has a pretty good record of bringing out some quality projects. We are very proud of the accomplishments they achieved. With that, we'll move on to our exhibits. Exhibits can be simple trifold boards, or they can be more elaborate. They have specific dimension requirements that someone will be in the area to verify for you. You don't have to worry about, wait, is this actually 6 feet tall? Is it 40 inches deep? There will be an exhibit hall manager on staff in the exhibit area where they will be making sure that all of the exhibits fit those size requirements. If you see one that you think looks questionable, please feel free to let them know. They will most likely be there in a blue Indiana Historical Society polo shirt, or they will be wearing a volunteer name badge and will be able to verify those dimensions for you. The other thing with exhibits is that they are only allowed to use 500 student-composed words. Now, these do not include primary sources, quotations, citations, and credit lines, but anything that the students themselves write does count. If you have any doubt on the number of words used, please, again, flag down that exhibit hall manager away from the student and ask the exhibit hall manager for a recount. And the exhibit hall manager will either recount it or they will flag me down and I will come count it. Either way, please do not assume a project is over the word count. We are happy to verify any questionable ones. All of the materials on the exhibit should be credited. This would include the title of the work in question, the date that it was created, and the location it came from. For example, if a student is using a photo of Ernie Pyle on their exhibit, the credit should be something along the lines of Ernie Pyle at the Warfront, 1945, Indiana Historical Society. Just like a documentary, the full citation will be in the annotated bibliography. When you are standing in there judging an exhibit, the exhibit hall manager will let students in to stand by their exhibit roughly 5 minutes ahead of their judging time. All you have to do is just move on to the next exhibit at that specific time. You'll have about 15 minutes to judge your exhibit entries, and I am trying to make it so you have a few more gaps during that time so that you can spend a little more time reviewing all of the information. Any questions about exhibits? Again, they can be very simple, like the ones you see on the board or on your screen, or they can be very elaborate. Students have created everything from voting booths to, someone created a podium that had sound wired out of it. The point with everything is the history, no matter how simple or elaborate it is. We'll pause for just a moment longer in case any more questions come through. All right, our fourth project category is papers. These are 1,500 to 2,500 words max. Now, this isn't limited to student-composed words. This word count will include all quotations and primary or secondary source material that is cited or quoted in the project. This number does not include your citations, footnotes, endnotes, or the appendix. Papers are not required to have an appendix, but if they do, they should be used sparingly and where appropriate. They shouldn't be used as a way to get around the student's word count. They should also be referenced in the paper. It shouldn't just be floating there in the ether waiting for you to happen upon it. The appendix should only include maps, pictures, or graphs. Students can use footnotes, endnotes, or inline citations. The only thing is that they need to be consistent with which one they use. A lot of the times that will be determined by their teacher, so students can cite anything in either MLA format or Chicago Manual of Style, whichever one is used by their teacher. So they may say, oh, we had to do it in this way. A lot of the times that is because that is what is required for their class. All of the papers will be sent to you ahead of time, and I ask that you please take a moment to read through them. Just like the exhibits, you'll have 15 minutes to judge these papers and speak with the students. So I urge you to spend that time talking to the student about their paper and about their project and their research. Papers are the only individual-only category. One last thing I want to mention with papers is that it can be a traditional history paper that you may be familiar with, or it can be a piece of creative fiction. Either one is perfectly acceptable. A lot of students will shy away from the creative fiction, or a lot of our judges might be confused as to how to judge a creative fiction piece. I say, frankly, it's the same way as a historical piece. They still have to have an argument that they're making. They still have to cite their sources, inspirational sources as well to a certain degree. But if they're writing about experiences on the Titanic, it can be a fictional individual on the Titanic and their experiences. But those experiences should be grounded in facts and in historical evidence and not just whatever they pull out of their mind. Do we have any questions on papers before we move on to our final project type? All right, our final project type is websites. Websites are limited to 1,200 student-composed words. Just like an exhibit, quotations, primary sources, credits, citations do not count towards that word limit. Websites can incorporate, apologies here, websites can incorporate photos, video, audio, whatever they would like, and they can be laid out in as many pages or as few pages as the student would like. But it should be easily navigated regardless of that layout. I always tell the kids, imagine that someone who has never touched a computer is reading your website. It should be easy enough that someone who is not familiar with websites can still follow their narrative. Most of the time, that tends to work for the kids. All materials on the website should be credited and fully cited in their bibliography, just like an exhibit. Just like the papers, you will be sent these websites ahead of time. Again, I ask you to read through them. You will have 15 minutes to judge these entries. Please use that time to talk to the student or students. Now, you may have other students and parents and teachers in the room. I ask that you just remind everyone that you have had an opportunity to view the website ahead of time. So the students will pull up their website for you, again, on the computers and projectors that are provided. And you can ask them to pull up a certain page, or you can pull up a certain page if you want to use it for an illustrative effect, or if the students would like to use it as an illustration of what they are answering your question for. But sometimes you may have to remind everyone in the room that you may not sit there and click through every single page with the student, that you have had that opportunity to look at it ahead of time. Again, this is all making sure that the students are aware that their project is being looked at and read, and they don't feel as though they are being ignored while they're there with their project. Do we have any questions about websites before we move on to our next section? Or any other project type if those came up too? All right, we are going to touch just a little bit on rule infractions. So this goes back into that rule book that the teachers and the students should be very familiar with at this point, but I don't expect anyone except myself to be an expert on. So just so that you are aware of our process, minor infractions are going to be those that don't provide a competitive advantage for the students, such as going over a word count by less than 10 words, including a school name on a project, things like that. They shouldn't prevent an entry from moving on, but it should be used to be a tiebreaker between otherwise equal entries. You can note them in your comments as things for the students to improve on. But where it gets a little more tricky is the major infraction. This is something that gives a competitive advantage to the students by allowing them to provide more information. Things like exceeding their word count significantly or running over time significantly on their documentary and performance, or having an exhibit that is larger than the specified dimensions. These should be noted in the comments, and these entries really shouldn't advance above others that did follow the rules. If it is something that you think is a major problem, please let me know. I will be giving out my cell phone number the day of the contest. I will be running around like a chicken with my head cut off, so you will see me all over the place. Please feel free to flag me down. I will address the issue. A note on disqualification as well, because this always comes up. We don't really disqualify projects, except in the case of plagiarism or using an entry from a previous year. Again, if you suspect something like plagiarism, bring it up to me and not the student. I will then explore it, and I will then discuss the best route with that student's teacher. So when in doubt, ask me. I am always happy to verify everything. Moving on to the required written materials that all of the students need. The first one is going to be the process paper, and I'm actually starting out on a lie here. The process paper is not required for the paper category. All 4 of the other project types, though, do require this. The process paper is really short and sweet. It's 500 words. If it's a group project, there's only one process paper, and it's just answering these 4 questions. And some of the students may even have used these prompts as their subject headers and their subtitles. So their process paper is describing how they chose their topic, how they conducted their research, how they selected their category and created their project, and how their project relates to the theme. You will take this back with you after you interview the students so that you can refer back to it as you are writing your feedback. And I find this incredibly helpful. Exhibits, I always like to try and take a picture of the exhibit too. Again, it just helps jog my memory as I'm writing feedback after I've spoken to so many students. The second bit of paperwork that all projects need, and this is a requirement for all 5 of the project types, is the annotated bibliography. This lists out the primary and secondary sources used by the students in their project. Now, primary sources are going to be those that directly relate to the topic by participation or by time. These include things like letters, speeches, diaries, newspaper articles, objects, oral histories, photographs, anything like that. Secondary sources are going to be those that provide some sort of analysis or factual evidence on a topic, including things like bibliographies, biographies, modern articles, websites, documentaries, and books. Some of these can be tricky. Even we historians get tripped up by some of them. And it's okay if the students mislabel a few of those confusing ones. For example, students will sometimes mislabel a painting made in the 1800s about a battle in ancient Greece. It's a secondary source, but some students can get the timeline a little fuzzy and mislabel it. This is where their annotations are going to be very helpful. In their annotations, this is where students should say whether the source was primary or secondary, or justify why it is one or the other if it's confusing, why the source was important, and how it was used in their projects. The annotations, are not a place for students to add new information that they just couldn't fit in with their project. It is not a place to get around word limits. We've got a question real quick that I will get to now that we have finished this slide. Where do interviews fall as a source in a documentary? Good question, Christy. That will depend on the interview. If it is an interview from someone who had experienced the event, they would be a primary source. If it is interviewing a professor or an expert, they would then be a secondary source. And so kind of go along that same idea of if they directly relate to the topic by they participated in it, or if they were around at the same time as the topic was taking place, they will be a primary source. If they are an expert several years later and they have done their own research and they have maybe interviewed other people on it, they would then be a secondary source. Does that help clear that up, Christy? Perfect. Yeah, that one, like I said, even for historians, that one can be a little bit confusing. I will never fault a student for mislabeling one because adults make the mistakes too. And so always happy to help them identify which one it should go under, or just let them know that, yeah, no, it's confusing. I feel I am right there with them. All right. So now we're going to get into the actual judging process. And you see it's broken down into 4 kind of more manageable steps. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to greet the students. Then you're going to read the materials. Third, you're going to interview the students. And then finally, you're going to deliberate on the rankings. So 4 kind of more manageable bite-sized bits here. The first one is greeting the students. Introduce yourself with a smile. Remember, these are students who may be very shy and nervous. Part of your job is to help put them at ease by introducing yourself and letting them know how the judging process is going to go. Let them know that you are a person just like they are, and that you are interested in what they have to say. Let them know that you're going to be looking at their project and then that you have just a few questions for them. You'll ask them for their annotated bibliography and process paper. Then if they need to set up their project, like with a performance or a documentary, you can go ahead and ask them to set up. Once again, don't forget that performances, documentaries, and websites are open to the public, and so you will have to let the groups know when you are ready to move on to the next entry. Exhibits, they will already be there in the exhibit hall, and for papers, you may just have to step out into the hall and let them know that you're ready. The second thing that you're going to do is you're going to read the materials. Websites and papers, these should have been read ahead of time, but if you haven't had a chance to, when you get there for orientation, please take that time to review everything. For performances and documentary, this is where you will review their annotated bibliography and process paper during their setup time. Please don't feel like you have to read the whole thing while you are there. You can reassure the students that you will have several hours when you aren't with them back in the judging headquarters to review their process paper and annotated bibliography more in depth. For exhibits, go on ahead and review the annotated bibliography and process paper and read the text on the exhibit. But do keep in mind with that one, you only have 15 minutes. It is a very tight time, and I am forever trying to make that situation better for you guys. So I recommend taking a picture of the exhibit to refer back to, taking notes. Spend that time reading the exhibit because you can always take the annotated bibliography and process paper with you and read those more in depth afterwards. That's really your only time with the exhibit, so take advantage of that. Your third step is going to be to interview the students. Please remember that they are the experts on that contest day. Your goal is to let them shine. The questions are designed to help get clarification on things that may be confusing, and the interview process is really to just put them at ease. I find that if you think about it more as a conversation and less of a judging period, you will actually start to get into a more easy tone and natural tone that will help set the students at ease. The types of questions that you should be asking are not pop quiz questions. They are not, in what year did this battle in the Civil War occur? Who were the individuals involved? It is much less in depth and more about their process. Why did they choose a certain topic? Why? What was their most important source? Why did they choose to include this? Have they thought about looking at this? What would you put in or change if you had more time to do so? What did you learn by doing this project? This is just a small selection of the hundreds of questions you can ask. On the contest day, I will have a selection of questions for you to fall back on. There are also more posted on our website under the contest section for National History Day in Indiana. There are some questions that are off limits. I urge you to keep, not just urge, I require that all questions be focused on the student's research and project. No one should be asking them about their school, where they're from, any personal information. If a student offers something up, you're not going to get in trouble for that because that is on the student and what they decided to bring up. But we, as judges, as adults, shouldn't be asking them that information. I stress it because it comes up each year. At this point, I do want to take a moment to talk about something that is very near and dear to all of our students' hearts. And this is something called judge's bias. I want you to bring your personal experiences with you to your judging. Your experiences and your views are valuable. However, the goal of the project is that the students have done research and explored a topic that is of interest to them. And they have chosen a topic that they are backing up their argument with historical facts. Students can choose topics in any area of history, and history is a part of everything we do, including in our fashion, literature, art, medicine, science, math, sports, automotive, transportation, commerce, and more. The list is endless. Just because a topic is not what you may consider traditional history does not mean that it is not a good topic. Please be aware that some students may choose to focus on absent narratives as well, such as underrepresented groups or groups whose narrative is not the one traditionally heard. These are valid topics. You may be really interested in a baseball player and are thrilled that a student is looking at that player. But that project should not be ranked higher simply because you like the topic more. Students are looking more closely at their local history and how their community was shaped by events of the past. Just because you may not know a story from a small community does not mean that topic is inherently less significant than other events in history. Remember, recognition does not equal significance. And a lot of the times, these local topics are indicative of much larger national trends. Again, I want you to be aware that students are choosing topics from throughout history that may not be ones that you know of, and that's okay. Because really, I hope that you, just like me, learn something from these kids through this process. Now, finally, I'm going to stress this one very strongly. I do not care what your political beliefs are. These students will be exploring topics that include current political topics and how they emerged. And their argument may not align with your beliefs. And that is okay. You are assessing whether they adequately backed up their argument with historical facts. Please do not hold any personal views on things like abortion, religion, gun rights, etc. against the students if they do not agree with your views. And I say this so strongly because that is the number one concern I hear from students around the state and as young as 4th grade, is they are afraid of what judges may do or say or how they might rank them if the judges disagree with them based on the current political climate. My goal and my job is to make sure that these kids feel comfortable and that I am bringing in judges who set them at ease. All this is to say, please be aware of your personal bias and judge each entry on its own merit. I don't want to have to bust out Mama Bear on these topics because our kids are phenomenal across the state. So our fourth and final step, now that we got that heavy bit out of the way, is going to be to deliberate on the rankings. This is going to be the very first thing you do when you return to the judges' lounge with your co-judges. You are going to fill out something called a consensus sheet. It looks like just what you have here on your screen. You will rank 1 on down to the end, where 1 is your top entry. You may have more than one consensus form. Each form should be filled out separately and not judged against entries in other forms. This happens if we only have a few entries in a specific category. For example, if we only have 2 junior individual performances and 3 junior group performances, your judging team may be looking at all 5 of those performances. But the individual ones should only be judged and ranked against the individual ones, and the group ones only against the group ones. All projects are going to be scored on 3 separate things: 60% of the student's score is on the historical quality of the project. This includes how accurate the project is, that they have done thorough research, that they have used available primary sources, that they have a balanced presentation, and that they are thoughtful in their analysis and interpretation. I get asked frequently by both judges and students alike what available primary sources means. What this means is that students are expected to have looked for what they can freely access. I do not expect any student to pay an archive any amount of money for access to a particular source, or to have driven hundreds of miles to access a source. But maybe they could call and see if the archivist could send them some information. We want to see that they have put in some effort to find the information for their project. If a student comes to me and tells me they can't find any pictures on the Holocaust, then frankly I know they haven't actually looked. There is no magic number of sources. I urge you to use your best judgment based on what you think might be freely available out there. This balanced presentation bit comes in with those multiple perspectives. We want students to have looked at the story from all angles, or as many as they can get information on. It may be harder for them to get a certain perspective. For example, if they're looking at the use of smallpox to eradicate Native peoples, they may find it more difficult to find information from the Native perspective during that time period. 20% of the score is on relation to the theme. The project should explain how it relates to the theme, and it should place the project in historical context and demonstrate the historical significance of the project. So when you're looking at this, you notice that 80% of their project is on the history. This final 20% comes into the clarity of presentation. And this is all about their written project. It is not how well they orally present in their interview. Their project should be effective and creative, and clear and free of errors or distraction. If they are using a fog machine in their performance, is it done with purpose? Or is it just because it was on a post-Halloween sale? Did they spell John F. Kennedy's name one way, and was that the correct way, or did they spell it 7 different ways throughout their project? Things like spelling and grammar errors can be corrected, and those should be mentioned. But the important thing is that 80% of their project goes back to the history, because it is the most important part of what they are doing. When it comes to filling out their comment sheet, think about it this way. A teacher should be able to pick up this comment sheet and know exactly how to help their students improve. A student should look at this and know why they ranked where they did. If you just write things like, good job, awesome project, love your topic, then the student doesn't know what they did well or how to improve for the future. Please do not include any rankings or indications that the students should get an award on the sheet. Again, if a student doesn't get any, they will be hurt. I urge you to try to fill the space. As you are writing, you will find that this space fills very quickly. I like to look at the comment section as a letter to the student or the students. You want to be specific, not just in what the students need to work on, but also what they did well. The check marks should reflect the areas of improvement. I like to start kind of in this middle for all of the projects that I see, and then move up or down, depending on what the project shows. This is a much better example of what we are looking for. Criticism is phrased constructively, and specific criticism and praise is backed up with examples so that the students have a clear idea of what they did and did not do well. The comments support the placement of where the check marks are on the page. And it ends on a positive note. I always try to end my comment sheets with something like, thank you for participating, or thank you for teaching me something new, something like that. I recommend using our lovely little comment sandwich here to phrase critical feedback. Start off with what the students did well, include your criticism, and then leave off with another positive comment. When writing feedback, phrase it as a suggestion. If you write something like, "Don't use toothpicks," the students don't know why. Try something like, "Think about using a different material than toothpicks to get a cleaner, pardon me, to get a cleaner look." Other language to use could be consider, perhaps more, or use more, as these are friendlier ways than a more direct way. When it is too direct, students can become discouraged, or they can dismiss your comments because, oh, they're just being mean. We want them to take the criticism and the positive feedback to heart. So finally, we are in the home stretch, everyone. What expectations do I and the students have for you? First and foremost, have fun. I hope that you learn something new and have an opportunity to share a love of history with these students, because they are so excited to teach you new things. And this is really such a fun experience because they will get so wrapped up in the process and so excited that their excitement will become so infectious. It is the most hectic 6 weeks of my life, but it is the most fun 6 weeks of my life. I also want you to put the students at ease. No matter the age of the student, the best way to do that is with a smile and approaching the interview from a friendly standpoint. We as adults get nervous talking to each other about new things and showing off the work we've done. Kids are going to be just like that, no matter their age. And just approaching it with a friendly atmosphere will do wonders for everyone from 4th grade on up through 12th in making them feel more comfortable in answering your questions. My final expectation is that feedback should be thorough and give students ideas on how to improve for the next level of competition or just for their future academic success. Really, the students and I have the same goals, and these are it. So with that, we have reached the end of our time for tonight. I want to thank you all for joining me on this webinar on this freezing evening. As a couple of reminders, this will be sent out to you tomorrow as a recording so that you can go back to it at any point. But I'm going to go on ahead and hang on the line for probably the next 15 or 20 minutes, depending on as questions dwindle down, so that we can answer any of them. But you are also free to email me at either of these two email addresses. Both of them go directly to me. My last name is a bit of a bear, so please feel free to just go with NHDI at indianahistory.org. It all goes directly to me. And I see a couple of questions rolling in, and so we will go on ahead and tackle them. Our first one: how soon will we know which category we will be judging? Great question. So you will know. I am trying for a week and a half ahead of time. Some of the schools have been out for a lot of snow days, as has happened through all of January and February, it seems. And so right now I'm getting everything out to our judges right at a week ahead of time. So about a week to a week and a half, you will know not just which category you'll be judging, but you will also have those papers and websites at that time. Great question as well, Amanda. If a group does not include their annotated bibliography or process paper before the website gets cut off, can they get the same credit for bringing it in on the day of contest? Yes, especially, Amanda, I'm going to call you out a little bit on this one since I know you are up in the Northeast Fort Wayne region where you guys have been greatly affected by all of those out of school days. I will be letting all of the judges know that morning that with the websites being a little hinky like that, if the students brought their process paper and annotated bibliography, that is perfectly acceptable. Great question as well, Kristen. Do students need to address both parts of the theme, or can they just choose one? They can choose just one. As the students move up in competition, especially when they get to the state and national level, they will see that most of the projects will incorporate both. So the way I phrase it for the kids is that if they are looking at multiple sides of the story, they will see triumph and tragedy come into play. Because what is a triumph for one person is inevitably a tragedy for another person. Even if they are looking at a topic where it is a tragedy and the triumph that they pull in is that there is a lack of a triumph. The goal is that they are seeing how they both come into play. It is not required that they look at both, but you will find the strongest projects do. Great question, Kristen. Great question as well, Lydia. Will there be further instructions for the day of, such as parking and things like that? Yes, when we send out those judging assignments and the other pieces, you will also be getting information as to where to park. We will be including maps highlighting where the best places to park are in relation to the building that you'll be in, directions on how to get to the room in question, where judging orientation will be, as well as some more general information like those day of logistics. Great question as well. What's the dress code? I recommend business casual. You don't have to go extreme with it. But I will say that the students will be dressed up. The majority of them will be busting out their Sunday best for this. Some of their parents will have them dressed up in suits. They will be wearing nice clothes. And so kind of again that putting them at ease. If you dress similarly nice as they are, they won't feel as awkward and out of place. So if you want to wear jeans, that is perfectly fine because I will also be wearing jeans that day. But please try to maybe dress it up with a maybe nicer shirt, something like that, nicer shoes. Business casual is a good kind of mid-ground to go with. We are still looking for judges for all of our contests except Fort Wayne, which is coming up in about 3 days now. So if you do know of anyone who might be interested in judging, please feel free to have them sign up. Let me know, and I'd be happy to pair you with a friend, with a family member, whatever you would like. More the merrier when it comes to learning. How late can we sign up to judge? You can honestly sign up to the night before. Fort Wayne, I have turned off the sign up for the Fort Wayne contest simply because we actually have all the judges we need, which is a very rare occurrence for us, which I am over the moon about. But otherwise, I will leave the judging sign up open until the night before. If you do sign up the night before a contest, I ask that you just shoot me a quick email so that I can send you the information because I will be traveling at that point. to the different contest sites, and so may not see it right away. But if you shoot me an email, then it'll pop up on my notifications and I'll get to it faster. Lydia, I'm actually going to reply to your comment here out loud because it is actually going to tie in perfectly with something that everyone will see at regionals. If you have your first judging experience at regionals and want to come join us at the state contest in April and want to wait to sign up until after you've had your first judging experience to see how it goes, please do. I will have reminders in everyone's judging packets at each of the regional contests. I definitely urge you to come see how the students did, see what the competition was like from all over the state. And so that is perfectly fine if you want to judge once and then see how it goes and see if you have it in your schedule and would like to sign up for the state contest after that. I want to thank everyone again for volunteering to help out with NHDI. It really does make such a huge difference for the students to just know that people are willing to listen to what they have to say as they dive into history and how it shapes the world we live in. It is truly a fascinating experience to watch these kids develop their projects over the course of the year and watch as they become more and more invested in each of the projects that they look at. So thank you for taking that fun ride with me. No problem, Lydia. Thank you. I'll stay on for probably another 5 to 10 minutes. It seems like we might be dwindling down with questions. So we'll kind of cap it at 5 to 10. Thanks, Wesley. I am excited to see you at an upcoming contest. You have a great night too. Thanks, Laura. I'm excited to see you again at, I believe it's Central I'm seeing you at. So it'll be good to see you soon. It's a very competitive year this year, so you have a lot to look forward to. Great question. This is our last webinar this year. We are tentatively looking at including another one just before state. We're going to get through all of the regional contests, gather some of our information from our evaluations from there, see if I can tell from you guys, you thought it was very useful. And so I'll be doing a little bit of informal discussion with all of our judges at each of the regionals to see maybe what they, if they are judging for state, if they would like to. But if that is the case, you can definitely keep an eye out for probably the first week of April is when I would put that. So a good week and a half before the state contest. Otherwise, I am planning on doing this each year during contest season. Thank you, Lydia. Have a wonderful night. I look forward to seeing you soon at a contest. Laura, since you're still on the line, I've got a couple doozies for the Central region that I've been seeing over the past couple of weeks at school showcases. Oh, I swear these kids are teaching me new things left and right, even about topics that I thought I knew really well. They are digging deep this year for some of their research, and it is so exciting to see. Thank you very much, Ellis. I look forward to meeting you at Franklin College. Have a good night. Looks like we might be wrapping up here. I have just a few stragglers on the line, so I'll stay on for another 2 minutes. So while I wait for those 2 minutes, I will just say thank you all again. It is astounding what the Indiana historical community is able to come out to do to support these students all over the state. It really means the world to them. And so thank you for taking your time, not just tonight, but on the contest days to help support our students. It means so much to them, and it means a lot to the Historical Society that you are willing to spend your time with us. So with that, I don't think anything else is coming in. So I will go on ahead and say thank you on my behalf for coming in and joining us. If you do have any other questions that do come up, please, again, feel free to shoot me an email. Otherwise, you will see this recording in your inbox sometime tomorrow morning. It takes just a little bit of time to convert and process and compress the file to get it where it can send. You'll see a copy of this presentation, as well as a few of the handouts and a direct link to some of those questions, the contest questions on our website. So you have it all in one handy spot. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening and stay safe and warm in whatever this Indiana weather is deciding to do for us this coming week. All right. Have a great night, everyone.